Hi, and welcome to Web3 Unfiltered. Here we go beyond hype to examine how systems actually work, from infrastructure and incentives to the deeper mechanics shaping decentralized technologies. I am your host, Collins Victory Odabi. Now, there's this pattern that keeps repeating across emerging technology. New tools appear, we have adoption accelerating, and capital flows in. And then systems starts to break. Not because the technology doesn't work, but because the foundations underneath it weren't built to handle scale, risk, or complexity. AI is being deployed without governance. Blockchain systems are being used without clear security models. And leadership teams are making high stakes technical decisions without fully understanding the systems they're responsible for. The result is predictable: security failures, operational fragility, and systems that collapse under pressure. My guest today works at the exact point where those failures become visible. Joining me today is Kelvin Carlson. He's a tech CXO partner, a four-time CTO and CISO, and an executive coach who helps companies scale technology and leadership systems simultaneously. His work sits at the intersection of cybersecurity, AI governance, infrastructure design, and executive decision making. Yeah, translating complex technical risk into strategies leaders can actually act on. Kevin, welcome to Web3 Unfiltered. How are you doing today?
Hey, doing great. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here. I look forward to the discussion.
Same here, Kelvin. First off, Kevin, I'd like to ask my guests to talk a bit about themselves. So very briefly, let's hear your story. What is your story and how did you get involved in it?
Sure. Well, it goes back to the early 70s. I was a kid in seventh grade, and I had the opportunity to learn how to use a HP 3000 connected to a teletype terminal or a TTY 33 for those who remember those days. Wrote my first few lines of code in BASIC, and ever since then I've just been hooked. I got involved in programming as a profession when I got out of college, and kind of worked my way up through the ranks, but cut my teeth developing software in C, C++, and assembly language back in the 80s and 90s, and worked my way up through the ranks, taking my first CTO role with a software company in Austin, Texas in 1999. After that, I held 4 additional CTO roles, 2 with product companies and 2 with services companies. The bulk of my career was spent in the consulting and services space, and so it was a really natural segue for me to move into fractional CTO work, which I did when I joined TechCXO as a partner in late 2018. Since then, I've been focused about 50-50 on fractional CTO work and fractional CISO work. And as you mentioned, I am a trained executive coach and coach technology leaders, rising technology leaders, and any leadership inside of technology companies.
Amazing, Kevin. So you're actually a 5-time CTO holder. You held a CTO role 5 times and not 4 times. It's really,
Yes.
really amazing. And Kevin, most companies don't fail because of a single bad decision. They fail because of compounded blind spots, gaps between leadership and technology, and also risks that quietly build up until something breaks. What makes your perspective quite different is that you've sat across multiple roles: CEO, CTO, CISO, which means you're not just seeing one layer of the system, you're actually seeing how they interact, conflict, and sometimes completely misalign. That view is rare and it changes how problems are identified in the first place. So you've operated as a CEO, CTO, and CISO. How does that combination change the way you diagnose what's actually broken inside the company?
Well, that's a great question. I think, I guess the answer is it varies, right? I think every company is very different and unique. And while you might see some similar problems from company to company, the way that they came about and the way that they generate issues are always pretty unique. Something you said earlier is that companies don't fail because of a single bad decision. Most don't, but some do. Like if you go back to the beginning of the internet heyday, back in the 90s, there were several companies that failed. Traditional brick and mortar companies failed because they just didn't think this internet thing was going to go anywhere. Turned out they were quite wrong. Some reacted quickly enough to save themselves, and others didn't. So while it's rare, what I typically see where companies are really struggling is that they have put off strategic work longer than necessary in favor of short-term value. And what I mean by that is a company might completely ignore scalability as their business is growing because they're so focused on onboarding new clients, and they've pulled engineering resources into the onboarding process, or they have security issues that crop up and they're more focused on delivering new functionality and keeping customers happy. And so, one is very sales oriented. The first example, a very sales oriented organization. Second one is a very product centered organization. And a very engineering centered organization can also spend time doing unnecessary things, refactoring code, adding things in that aren't needed yet at the expense of both of those other two. So I think what it really comes down to is a balance. And having leadership that understands that balance and isn't predisposed towards one particular view, especially a very myopic view, is helpful. The ability for a CEO to sit with the leadership team and hear honest feedback, and criticism of constructive criticism in and around how the company is doing business and how the technology is doing, and actually listen to people in product and engineering and sales is really important. All of those areas, one may be a higher priority than another at any given time, but where I see companies really struggle is where one has a heavier focus than both of the other two for an extended period of time, and that never leads to a good place.
Amazing, Kevin. Really, really amazing. Now, once these blind spots exist, they don't just stay theoretical. They turn into fires, as I would call them. They're urgent, high-stakes problems that force companies to react quickly without often fully understanding the root cause. And by the time someone like you is brought in, the issue is usually already affecting performance, security, and growth. So the real question becomes, what are these recurring failure patterns? In your experience, what's the most common fire you get called in to fix, and what does it usually reveal underneath?
Well, I'd say over the past 5 years, the most common fire is a security-related issue. So, there's been a vulnerability that's been exploited. There's been data exfiltrated from the company, or a threat actor manages to bring a site down, delete resources. I've seen this multiple times, and it's not uncommon for younger companies, especially, to put security on a back burner because they're not necessarily visible, or they're not necessarily a highly targeted company. But the interesting thing is that that landscape is changing so much, especially with LLMs, and I'm sure you've seen some of the recent Anthropic news about their latest model that can uncover vulnerabilities. This is just going to get more intense, I think. So I think paying attention to security, especially plugging gaps that exist because of outdated software components from the open source community. The tools are all there. If you're keeping your code in a repository like GitHub, they have dependabot alerts that can alert you to out of date components that have new version upgrades. They can also look for malware in your components. They can also look for known security issues that get announced. And it's really important to pay attention to those, because I promise you, if you're focused somewhere else and all of a sudden you have a threat actor get in and exploit a vulnerability, it changes your attention really, really fast, and often it's way too late. So I think that's got to be the number one thing that I've seen over the past 5 years.
All right, Kevin, thank you so much. And talking about LLMs, AI has accelerated everything, but it's also exposing how unprepared most organizations are. And there's a rush to adopt these models to automate workflows, integrate intelligence into systems, and underneath that, there is only unresolved issues around data integrity, governance, and security that don't disappear just because AI is layered on top. In many cases, there's this saying that AI doesn't fix weak systems, it only amplifies them. So what's the most dangerous mistake companies are making right now when integrating AI into their systems?
Well, I think I would sum it up in one word, and that word is carelessness. Your LLMs are amazing tools, and I think carelessness comes out in one of two different ways. First is not being careful about what you're prompting the AI to do and what data you're providing it as context for a conversation. Most LLMs have settings where you can say, hey, keep my chats private. Some don't. Some require a subscription level to do that. And in some cases, you don't want to submit certain information regardless, right? So things like if you're using an LLM and you're not covered by like a BAA in a HIPAA environment, for example, then you shouldn't be submitting any HIPAA data. I err on the side of caution and try not to submit any of that type of data to a non-local LLM, but that's just my preference. Certainly, there are some that are secure and process HIPAA data and PII and PCI and all different kinds of sensitive data. But due care has to be taken to make sure that it's being handled appropriately. If it can be tokenized and analyzed that way, that's even better. So that's the first way. The second way carelessness comes out is, I'll use an example here of using AI for coding. I'm sure you've seen the headlines out there how some leaders are saying, hey, we can get rid of our software development team, or we can get rid of X number of people and just use coding agents. I think that's I really think that's kind of a unfortunate way to view things, because it takes, right now with these current models, it takes an experienced developer to guide them, or at least know what's going on when they're when it's showing you what it's doing. I, for one, typically shy away from running any LLM agency, for example, Claude Code, with permissions wide open, because it can lead to things like, I'm sure you read about, where a company's database and all their backups were deleted by an AI agent in 9 seconds. And just simply watching what it was doing and having it ask for permission to do things could have stopped that. I realize there's a huge emphasis on speed and using AI to gain coding speed, but the incremental benefit of not watching what it's doing when it's weighed against the risk of it taking actions is just, it doesn't make any sense to me. Maybe that will change, but right now I think that is just another form of carelessness that can lead to problems, not only like having a database deleted, but poor code, poor architectural decisions like at the code level, just lots of things that can manifest because someone's not paying attention.
You're absolutely right, Kevin. There are a lot of things that can manifest when paying attention. And just like I said, if there are weaknesses in the systems, in the companies, or whoever is using the AI to build applications or anything, the AI will only amplify it. And at the end of the day, it might look all rosy and smooth at first, but eventually we begin to see disturbances and issues. And once AI is embedded into decision making, we understand that the stakes change. You're no longer dealing with isolated tools. You're dealing with systems that influence operations, customers, and even financial outcomes. And that introduces a different level of responsibility around how these systems are designed, monitored, and controlled. So what does real AI governance look like in practice, beyond policy documents and surface level compliance?
So beyond policy documents and service level compliance, both of which are very important, by the way, I think there are guardrails that need to be put in place and codified. So there are, like at the code level, there are packages out there that would allow you to set up guardrails in the code to Look for types of prompts that you don't want to be issued. Look for data being sent or returned that is harmful or potentially might expose some data that you don't want exposed, and stops things in their tracks. And those are important because it filters things out at the local code level before it gets to the LLM. Another area where I think some very tight controls need to be put is around the possibility of prompt injection. Or, for example, you say you can have a perfectly innocent prompt, but then you supply a document that someone has embedded in like a 1-point font in white somewhere on the document where it's never going to show up, some instruction that the LLM is going to read and interpret and act on. And if that LLM has access to system resources versus just doing things like document summarization, for example, real harm could come from that. So I think that the things beyond policy and sort of compliance level things where people just have to agree to have the best behavior, you also need some codified controls in the in your application, or things in your I'll say your application infrastructure that are watching what is submitted and what's returned, and making sure that things that you don't want sent or you don't want received are being filtered out and logged. It's also possible to use that same technology to log, like you can use a hook, for example, in Claude to write every single prompt to a database or to a file system or whatever you want to do. And then you can go through and audit those prompts to see how people are using the technology. So I think that's a sort of the basic level where I think people should start. But it's not something that can really be ignored because of the dangers of what an LLM can actually execute if it's got any sort of system level access.
Amazing, Kevin. You've given instances of where AI compromise systems that they are designed to maybe scale or help assist. In those cases, security is often treated as a layer you add after the fact, but in reality, it's actually structural. If security isn't built into the architecture from the beginning, you don't have a secure system, you have a fragile one that just hasn't been tested yet. And in fast-growing environments, that fragility tends to show up at the worst possible time. And you've given instances of security oversight that you see in scaling companies. They give AI access to documents that they shouldn't really have access to, and also permissions that they shouldn't really have access to. And this becomes critical in decentralized environments. Web3 systems introduce new trust models, new attack surfaces, and new assumptions about verification. But they don't remove risk, they redistribute it, which means the way we think about resilience has to evolve. So in your experience, Kevin, how should builders think about cyber resilience differently in decentralized and blockchain-based systems?
I'm going to ask you to rephrase that or state it one more time. I think I missed something in there, and I'm not sure exactly how to answer your question.
Okay, I was talking about the lapses or the security oversights that you see in scaling companies. And I was saying that it becomes more critical in decentralized environments, like Web3 and blockchain-based environments. So Web3 systems they introduce new trust models, new attack surfaces. It's a developing area, and there are new assumptions about verifications, but they don't remove risk. They only redistribute it, which means the way we think about resilience has to evolve as builders. So how should builders think about cyber resilience differently in decentralized and blockchain-based systems?
Got it. So you're right. It does just redistribute it. It's important to understand that a company's security footprint is not just their systems. It's every system that it's integrated with, every component that is downloaded and used, every third-party tool or library that's purchased. I mean, you may have agreements with these other companies, perhaps that say they're going to follow certain security procedures, but the risk remains. So I think it's very important to understand security from a holistic level, which means not just the code, not just the infrastructure, but every third party that has a tool or a component or a SaaS system or anything that you're integrated with, including APIs. It's very important to understand that. And then also organizational level security. So this is things like password strength, and are you following NIST guidelines? There's a pretty simple, CIS has a simple, what they call an implementation group 1 security assessment, and it's basic security hygiene. And most small companies that I know don't even check half the boxes on that. And these are very easy things to put in place. So you're right. I think that the security footprint, the real security footprint of a company is much broader than what the company might suspect it is, because it's affected by so many external tools and systems, and then also by the people that are both employees and contractors and consultants that are often the most fragile point within a company and the easiest point of entry. So, the landscape has changed tremendously. And I think broadening the perspective when it comes to what the sort of the threat landscape looks like has to be something that the company prioritizes.
Well, thank you so much, Kevin. In all of these, do you understand that the recurring theme here is that technical problems are often leadership problems in disguise? I don't know if you'll agree with me, but decisions about architecture, security, and scaling doesn't happen in isolation. They are driven by security priorities, understanding, and also blind spots. And increasingly, companies are bringing in fractional executives to bridge those gaps quickly. That shift raises an interesting question about how leadership itself is evolving. Before we round up the episode, why are most companies turning to fractional CTOs and CISOs instead of building those roles internally?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons that's happening. I think one of the most obvious ones is that it's experience based. So, when I started doing fractional work in late 2018, it was still. Tech CXO has been around since the early 2000s, but in terms of fractional CTOs, it was still a pretty young, industry. And I think people really discovered the value of fractional post-COVID. And I think that when companies realized they could get a lot of things done, with remote workers, and then they could essentially hire very experienced executives in a fractional sense instead of a full-time sense, that was sort of a real boost to the fractional community. But I think the reason companies hire fractional is because they want decades of experience without, paying the salary that decades of experience will command in the market. So it's a way to engage a very experienced resource at a much lower cost than hiring somebody full-time. So I think that's one of the reasons. Actually, I think that's probably the biggest reason, and probably the most important reason, is simply the ability to get experience at a much lower total cost than going out and hiring a full-time person, especially if a full-time person isn't required.
I think you're absolutely right, because imagine building those roles, time and resources, and spent on one person, and they have to start all over again. So yeah, I think this makes sense. So Kevin, thank you so much. This has been a very enlightening session. Before we round up the episode, do you have any final notes or comments or anything at all for our listeners?
Just wanted to say thanks for listening. And if anybody wants to get in touch with me, you can do it on LinkedIn. It's linkedin.com/in/Kevin Carlson. I also publish a weekly LinkedIn newsletter called The Executive Shift, which would be great if anybody wanted to read and comment on some of the articles I've written there. And or you can get in touch with me at the Tech CXO website, which is techcxo.com.
All right then, thank you so much. So on this episode, we have learned that scaling doesn't just test your products. It tests your systems, your security, and your leadership. And when those things aren't aligned, failure isn't random, it's it's practically inevitable. And the companies that succeed aren't just building faster, they're building with a deeper understanding of how their systems actually work and where they can break. That's what separates momentum from sustainability. So that wraps up today's episode of Web3 Unfiltered. A big thank you to Kelvin Carlson for joining us today. Until next time, stay sharp, stay curious, and keep building.